Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I hope I will be speaking to those who are interested in the business of the House. And you know, Honorable Speaker, it's true what you said, because the business of this House is the business of the people who have given us the greatest honor above very many other people to come and represent them in the National Assembly. And the issues you hear the Honorable Omboko raise are indeed pertinent issues in line with Article 201 of our Constitution on the cardinal place public participation should play in all our legislative processes and even decisions in the executive. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, I want to agree with the Honorable Omboko. It is true the public participation process in the budget-making process has been abused, grossly abused. And as Honorable Omboko says, that is why you find in a situation where 2 billion shillings was set aside for public participation, those who sat in the budget committee found it prudent or imprudent, whatever the case may be, to put an additional 10 billion shillings. But what is more worrying, Honorable Speaker, is that if the entire 12 billion shillings went to the counties that were slated in for the public participation exercise, then there will be no problem. The problem has come because it is people who have vested interest in those committees where they sit in that then use that opportunity to put projects in their own constituencies and counties far from what was intended by the public participation, Honorable Speaker. And I say this with immense respect to those who sit in the Budget and Appropriations Committee, because it is a committee that I have chaired before in this House. And the tradition that we had set right from the 11th Parliament, when the new Constitution came into being, is that money would be set aside for public participation, and over a period of 4 years, we would cover all counties in the country. And it is sad that some counties like Vihiga and the other 10 counties that were slated for benefit of these monies now lose out because of what is otherwise bad manners by ourselves, those who sat in the Budget and Appropriations Committee. And I say this, Speaker, because we have now reconstituted a new Budget and Appropriations Committee. Let me be on record, it will not be business as usual. This House will not sit back and allow members who sit in the Budget and Appropriations Committee to use the position they hold in that committee to appropriate money to only their constituencies at the expense of other Kenyans. Because all these 349 members come here to represent people. They come here to seek and lobby for resources to go back to their people. That is why the people of Vihiga are crying today. It is sad that you would find in a county that was to benefit from public participation, a national polytechnic in a county that was slated to benefit for public participation, getting a meager 10 million shillings, whereas in another county where a member in the Budget and Appropriations Committee sits in, a national polytechnic gets 250 million shillings. It is immoral. It is unethical and very unprofessional of us who sit in those committees. And I say it will not be business as usual because we have agreed as the House leadership, both in the majority and the minority party, that those who get the opportunity to sit in whichever committee you sit in that committee to ensure that there is equitable allocation and share of resources across the country. And we will make sure that that happens. I therefore wanted to urge the Honorable Omboko and the other members who are affected. I will engage with the National Treasury to ensure that those counties do not lose on account of the actions of the former Committee of Budget and Appropriations, so that within the next financial year, because they are now preparing the estimates for the next financial year, we factor in those counties that should have benefited this year and those that ought to benefit next year. But let this serve as a warning bell to the new committee. I know the committees are slated to hold their elections tomorrow. Whoever you elect in those committees, especially the Budget and Appropriations Committee, because it is one of the 18 committees whose mandate lapsed. And there are new members in that committee. An opportunity to serve in the Budget and Appropriations Committee of this House is not an opportunity to enrich yourself. It is not an opportunity to allocate resources to your constituency or your county or to those who you think are your friends above others. You must ensure, as members of that committee, there is equitable and fair distribution of resources, not just those in public participation. The reason why the Budget and Appropriations Committee has been elevated in our standing orders to be a committee that's all of you to be on the lookout. And we call out each out. And we call out each other, because that is the only way we can be able to hold each other to account, for us to be able to hold those in the executive to account. Because even those in the executive, it doesn't mean because you are a cabinet secretary, for instance, for roads or water or energy, that all projects should go to your home county. There must be equitable and fair allocation and share of resources in this country, and that is the spirit that we want to go ahead. Therefore, let me assure Honorable Omboko Milemba, I will pick up that matter with the National Treasury to ensure that none of the counties lose out. But also to tell members of the Budget and Appropriations Committee, whichever leaders you elect when you go to elections tomorrow, I pray that you will do what is just, what is right, and what is accountable by your own standards and by our own standards as a House. That public participation allocation was meant as seed capital. When you go out and listen to Kenyans, they tell you this National Polytechnic in this county has 20 or 10,000 students. They have hostels that accommodate only 1,000 students. You know, 2 billion shillings might not even be enough maybe to build hostels in that one particular institution. But you put in seed capital, which informs the next budget-making process. Therefore, if, for instance, the Honorable Omboko's constituency in Vihiga, they had a road that was identified as a critical link between his constituency and the county of Kisumu or another neighboring county, and the members of the Budget and Appropriations feel that that road is such a critical link, then they put maybe 50 million shillings or 20 million shillings as seed capital so that they get a budget line that will be added onto in the subsequent financial year's budget. Now, this year they should have benefited to add, but public participation should not be an end by itself, or you allocate, probably you find a school where they have no classrooms, children, you go to Turkana or maybe to somewhere and find children, especially or Baringo, where people had been displaced by bandits, classrooms were demolished or burnt down, and you find you can allocate 10 million shillings and give a school money to allow children to go to schools. That was the essence of public participation, but not the kind of abuse that we have seen in the last 2 years. And Honorable Speaker, I want to commit on behalf of the House leadership, in the majority, on the minority side, that we shall make sure it no longer happens in this House. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Junet.
Speaker, I don't have much to add to what the majority leader said, but suffice to say, Mr. Speaker, that the matter that has been raised by Honorable Milema Milema, Mr. Speaker, you remember this House never used to have the powers to look into the budget of the country. The new constitution gave us those powers, Mr. Speaker. But Mr. Speaker, what has been happening the last 2 years in the Budget and Appropriation Committee of this House, Mr. Speaker, borders criminality. If we lay bare, Mr. Speaker, those things, as has been discussed in the retreat we had of the leadership in Naivasha and also in the House Business Committee, Mr. Speaker, those issues, those atrocities, Mr. Speaker, cannot be shied away from talking about, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, how on earth can one county have an allocation, budget allocation of 12 billion shillings and a whole region has 60 million shillings, Mr. Speaker? What kind of country are we living in? Mr. Speaker, the Budget and Appropriation Committee went around the country to do public participation. And they ended up agreeing that they are going to use 2 billion shillings to allocate to those counties that they are visiting, Mr. Speaker. That amount ended up ballooning to 12 billion shillings, Mr. Speaker. And the beneficiary of that 12 billion shillings is not those counties that public participation was done on, Mr. Speaker. It is other counties and other constituencies, Mr. Speaker. The Budget and Appropriation Committee of this House has reached to the level where the chair of that committee, Mr. Speaker, now, members of parliament are going to his constituency for benchmarking, Mr. Speaker. Benchmarking. And all of us are supposed to receive the same amount of CDA, NGD, CDA, Mr. Speaker. What is making our members to go and benchmark in a colleague's constituency, Mr. Speaker? Because the colleague is receiving more funding because of him being the chairman of the budget committee. Let's be honest to Kenyans. Let's tell Kenyans the truth, that he was sitting in an advantageous position of chairing that powerful committee of the House, which you could do skewed allocation of resources to his constituents, Mr. Speaker. Otherwise, which member of parliament here can afford, through his NGCDF, to build classrooms, plaster them, put windows, put roof, put tiles in the classroom, cabros in the... Mr. Speaker, which member of parliament can afford to do that here? With a mere resources of 100 million shillings, Mr. Speaker, and advertise on Citizen Primetime News. Which member can do that? Can you raise up your hand if you can do that? None of the 349 members of this House, Mr. Speaker, can afford to do that. That can only be done by somebody who has access to bigger resources than any other member, Mr. Speaker. The Budget and Appropriation Committee did not start the other day. The distinguished leader of the majority party, Mr. Speaker, has been the chair of that committee for many years. And he has never done those things. I have been with him in this House. He has been very careful, and he has shared the resources of the country equitably, Mr. Speaker. I can say that without any fear of contradiction. Mr. Speaker, I want to remind members of this House, for those of us who have been here that time, who have been here for long, when the Budget Committee was chaired by Honorable, what was his name? The Member of Parliament from Embu, Mbere, the Reverend Mutava Musimi, Mr. Speaker. Members of that committee did the same thing they have done in the last 2 years. And one afternoon, the late Honorable Jacoyo Bidiwo came to the House, and he was seated exactly where I'm sitting today, and told the House the amount of money the Budget Committee put for themselves in the budget, Mr. Speaker. And the whole committee, that time, the membership of the Budget Committee was 52 or 51? 51. The whole committee was dissolved. And a new committee was formed, Mr. Speaker, based on what Honorable Jacoyo presented to the House, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if the Budget Committee does its business the way that the defunct committee has done, Mr. Speaker, the only option, the only solution to Mr. Speaker, that's available for this House is to convert the 349 members of this House into a Budget Committee. The whole House becomes a committee of the budget, Mr. Speaker. But as leadership and as parties, we have given responsibility and priorities to certain members. And especially on our side, and I'm sure even on Kenya Kwanza's side, we have picked one member per county from different regions and different counties, so that they can represent the interest of those regions and those counties and those constituencies. But Mr. Speaker, it looks like the committee now sits down and agrees on how to share the resources among themselves, forgetting that they are representing Kenyans and they are representing the whole House, Mr. Speaker, in that committee. As the majority leader has said, we will not desist, we will not hesitate to remove any member who behaves like the defunct committee, Mr. Speaker. I know there are remnants who have remained in that committee from the previous committee. I don't want to mention their names. We are giving them a warning that if you are not going to share the resources of the country equitably, Mr. Speaker, we will de-whip them. And we will discharge them from the committee, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, I saw, I don't want to mention names, an old man who has started a polytechnic which has 10,000 people. And he talked about his polytechnic very passionately. And he said he's requesting the executive to give resources to that polytechnic. And the polytechnic has 10,000 students. Mr. Speaker, in their wisdom of lack of it, through the chair of the committee and the committee, gave that polytechnic in Bungoma 25 million shillings and gave another one in another place 250 million, which has only 2,000 students. Was it 10 million? Yeah. They gave only 10 million there, and the other one they gave 250 million shillings, Mr. Speaker. We are going to name them. Mr. Speaker, we will not allow, because this is the house that takes care of the interest of the people, of what is concerned to the people, is discussed here, Mr. Speaker. And this matter of skewed distribution of resources, Mr. Speaker. Look at what's happening in the road sector, Mr. Speaker. It's shameful. In the road sector, Mr. Speaker, there are counties that have not seen any cent to tarmac any road, Mr. Speaker. And there are counties that have been having money every year, every month to tarmac certain roads. In fact, very soon, if we continue like this in the next 5 years, there are counties that will donate tarmac roads to others. They will say, take this tarmac and put it somewhere in your county. You can return it back after 2 years. Just use it for 2 years. Because they don't know where to put it actually. Mr. Speaker, I support the majority leader. This country can only prosper. This country can only go far if, as the representatives of the people, we become equitable in sharing our resources, Mr. Speaker. And that is why the Constitution gave us a mandate to look. Otherwise, the Treasury should bring a budget here and we just approve it as they have done. Because the previous Treasury, the previous Ministry of Finance under the previous regimes used to do very dangerous things in terms of sharing of resources of the country. That is why the new Constitution and the framers of this Constitution felt it fit to bring that mandate to the House. And now we want to allow that mandate to be abused in the House, Mr. Speaker. That will not happen. It will not happen over our dead body. With those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I tell Honorable Melemba, we will stand with you and we will make sure the people of Vihiga get their rightful share of the budget. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, members. Your leaders have spoken. I just want to advise the House that the Holy Book says, for everything you do to others, expect it to be done to you. For everything you do to others, expect it to be done to you. If you feel it's happy and fair, then it is good. And this constitution, like Ichungwa said without referring to it, the centrality of this new constitution is equity, fairness, and justice. And for all of you who have been given the privilege to serve in committees, you are public trustees. You don't represent yourselves. You represent the country. Because if members of a committee of privilege only work for themselves, how will a member who serves on the library committee ever do anything for their constituencies? So I want to encourage you, and majority and minority leader, please exercise your duties, your responsibilities to ensure that this democratically elected House discharges its duties and responsibilities to the satisfaction of every Kenyan in every part of the country. That a person in Mandera, a person in Vanga, a person in Lokitang, a person in Malaba does not sit in this House to get fairness, because we all have a duty to discharge fairly. So Mboko Milemba, thank you for bringing that point. And majority minority leader, as you have assured the House, move and correct that anomaly so that we have fairness. Those serving in the finance committee, I sit in my office and almost everybody wants to serve on that committee. Now I understand why. The budget committee, sorry. Everybody wants to serve on the budget committee. Now I fully understand why. Budget committee. Not finance, budget. So those who serve in the budget committee, you are the trustees of public good. So as everybody else. Whether it's transport, whether it's energy. I get a lot of information I just encourage you. Many of you are doing your second term, first term, a few doing third term. If you have to live longer, be fair. If you have to live longer, be just and be equitable in everything you do. Thank you. Farah Malim, yes, who is calling